Hey everyone, welcome to the conversation. Recently, I finished Dreams Come to Life by Adrian Kress, and wow, did it finally answer some Bendy and the Ink Machine questions for me. It's one of the best books based on a video game that I have ever read. I highly recommend you give it a read sometime. Before we get started, I just want to put out the disclaimer that this video will have spoilers from the game and book in it. I know that seems pretty obvious, but you've been warned. If you're planning on playing the game or reading the book, or both, turn back now. Alright, let's talk about 5 questions that Dreams Come to Life answered about Bendy and the Ink Machine. Number 1. Who is Boris? Throughout my first playthrough of the game, I tried to figure out who Boris was. The Boris that is your faithful companion, that Henry calls Buddy, and is eventually twisted into the monstrosity that Susie, Alice Angel, changes him into. While playing the game, I figured it was one of the workers that you hear voicing the tapes throughout the world. Maybe Wally Frank? Though, I now think that he did indeed get out of there. What I found at the end of the book is that the main character, the narrator Buddy, aka Daniel Lewick, becomes Boris the Wolf, the most perfect Boris that Alice Angel has ever seen. At the end of the book, Joey pulls a dying Buddy from the jaws of Bendy the Ink Demon. According to Mr. Drew, he saved Buddy's soul by moving it to Boris the Wolf's body, claiming that he made Buddy perfect. It's no coincidence that 2 characters called one Boris perfect. Other pieces of evidence pointing to Buddy's soul living on in Boris includes Buddy being tall and lanky, just like Boris, and that the young 17-year-old is fiercely loyal to his friends and family, just as Boris is to Henry. As mentioned, Henry also calls Boris Buddy throughout the game, creating a direct link between the two. One last cool Easter egg from the book that pointed to Buddy being the Boris that we all know and love is that the young man mentions that his teeth crack together in the elevator when it stops on a floor, something that Henry corrects if you give Boris his bone in the beginning of Chapter 3. This fact broke my heart. Not only did I bond with Boris while I played the game, but now I bonded with the person whose soul inhabits the cartoony shell. It's hard to tell if any of Buddy is left by the time Henry meets him in the games, but I like to think that Daniel imprinted his goodness on Boris, even if he doesn't remember who he is. Number 2. What made Sammy different?
I said, can I get an amen?
One thing that always stood out to me during my playthroughs of the game was Sammy. He wasn't one of the Bendy gang, nor was he a lurker springing from the inky depths. His soul was trapped in an almost human-like body, and he seemed to choose to wear overalls and a cut-out Bendy mask. What made him so different, and why was he obsessed with Bendy? The game made it seem that he was just a nut job that started to see Bendy as a god once he was trapped in the studio, but there always seemed like there was something more to it than that. Turns out, Sammy was around when one of the pipes carrying the ink around the studio burst, causing him to be covered in the black muck. Some of the ink got into his eyes, ears, and mouth, which then seeped into his body. As Sammy puts it, that day the ink found me. It wanted me. He wanted me. At first, I was scared. At first, I could feel it inside me, the drops I'd swallowed by accident. By luck. I could feel them moving around inside me. I shouldn't have been scared. I was foolish. Then the cravings started. I needed more ink. There was no choice. I had to. The more I consumed, the more I understood, the more I felt him, heard him. I need to please him. After the initial accident, Sammy started to drink the ink, slowly introducing the substance into his system and changing him into a unique character, still aware of what he is, but unable to break free of the ink.
Sheep, sheep, sheep. It's time for sleep.
Number 3. Is Joey Drew a good guy that asked Henry to save his employees after the experiments got out of hand? During a discussion about Bendy and the Ink Machine, someone brought up an interesting idea. What if Joey Drew sent Henry in to do the right thing? Maybe he realized that Henry would be the only one to stop Bendy, as Henry was the creator of the character. What if Joey is just a good guy that was led astray and made too many mistakes? Though I never really felt that that was true, the book solidifies that the real monster was Joey Drew. I'm going to do a whole video on Joey Drew soon, explaining why Joey isn't a good guy at all. But to answer if Henry was ever meant to save everyone, I don't know. At the end of the game, Joey implies that Henry is the only one to right his wrongs at the studio. However, the book explains that Henry was the one that created Bendy. and that he decided to leave when work at the studio started taking time away from his wife Linda. The book also describes Joey as being a spiteful man and never forgetting past transgressions. It isn't a far stretch to see how Joey would take Henry leaving personally, especially after his life's work fell apart, and want to trap his best friend in the studio as everything in his life was slipping away. His friend had what Joey didn't, and it probably made him angry enough to get rid of the problem by throwing Henry into the studio forever. And if Henry fixed the issue down there, well, that's a bonus. Number 4. Where does Bendy and the Ink Machine take place? I first thought that we were in the ink machine, as none of it seemed real. I figured since Joey had an ink machine in his house, that Henry was forced into it, and the world we played in was actually inside the ink machine, a recreated studio. However, the book changes that. After Buddy is turned into Boris, he writes, "I ran then. I ran away, into the darkness of the theater, down the trapdoors, and through the vents. I just ran. I disappeared into the building, into its secrets that even Joey Drew himself didn't know. I hid. I hid and he didn't find me. He couldn't find me. And I got to know the world underground. I got to know the theater and the studio. I watched, hidden, as they were merged together. I watched Mr. Drew fire people and hire new ones, and I watched as he tried to make the machine work. The world we play in is actually the studio that had been altered by the ink machine. As Buddy describes it, he saw how the world changed around him, merging, as Joey tried to get the machine to work. Even the river that runs underneath the studio, the one that we face off against the giant hand, is explained in the book as being caused by Buddy before he turned into Boris to drown the demon inside the ink. Speaking of ink. Question 5. Why are some characters perfect? One question that came to me while playing the game was why are some characters perfect and others are just blobs of ink? Some people mentioned that the imperfections stemmed from them being the earliest experiments, failures that Joey Drew used to make better versions later on. However, the book confirms what I suspected upon first meeting Susie as Alice Angel. It's not the timing of their creation, but the soul that is stuck within the characters themselves. In the book, Joey Drew explains to Buddy that he was chosen to work in the studio because of his good-natured soul from the very beginning. At the point where Buddy becomes Boris, I believe Susie already had her soul thrown into the ink machine to make Alice, which we know was a disaster. Susie came out as a wiggling, pussing, shapeless slug, which prompted Joey to use more pure souls in future experiments. The book also confirms that Allison Pendle, who we know was the second and far more perfect Alice Angel in the game, had a sort of air about her that made her uncompromisingly kind and warm. Even Tom Connor appeared in the book and came across as gruff and professional, but caring and protective of those he held close to his heart. Tom, as you know, is the name given to the second Boris we meet in the game, the one who is protective of Alice and even threatens Henry to keep him from hurting her. Tom was not a perfect man, so the Boris he inhabited wasn't either, as he was missing an arm, which Tom replaced with a mechanical version. And there you have it, my top 5 Bendy questions that the book Dreams Come to Life answered. I'm working my way through The Illusion of Living, an autobiography and philosophy written by Joey Drew. I'll be working on a full character breakdown of the man I have come to almost hate. I'm hoping that something will make me feel sympathy towards him, but I'm about 30% of the way through the book and it's not looking good. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like and subscribe for more of these lore videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.